Good morning to everyone. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. This is Angela Cook with SD1. I just want to say thanks to everyone for joining us for this second installment of what's happening at SD1. Some of you may remember this previously as our co-permittee meeting where we provided strictly stormwater information, but we have expanded this meeting to now bring you information from across the organization and kind of bring you up and share the highlights of what we've been doing over the last year here at SD1. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please keep your mics muted to avoid feedback during the presentations. And then on the reverse side, please remember to unmute your mic if you have questions or want to speak during the meeting. And feel free to just speak at any time or raise your hand. It's very informal this morning. And then lastly, we will be posting this on our website and Facebook page later today for access at any time. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you and bring Adam Cheney, our Executive Director, to the meeting at this time. Thanks.
Thank you, Angela, and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. Angela mentioned it. I'm not sure, this used to be kind of branded a different meeting, but we've now turned this into what's happening at SD1. So I want to welcome everybody to our latest edition. I want to start off by mentioning that we are celebrating our 75th year in existence and serving the Northern Kentucky community. So we have some plans for later in the year to kind of celebrate that achievement, but it's exciting for our staff this year to be celebrating our 75th year serving Northern Kentucky, and we're very proud of that. I'm going to be brief in my comments, and obviously we can't talk about what's happening really anywhere in the world without mentioning the effects of COVID-19 on the world, and specifically today on our operations. Early on when the pandemic first started, management took the approach from the very beginning. Number one, first and foremost, obviously, is the health and safety of our employees. So we wanted to take a positive and patient approach to this. So as we were adapting, management and staff were tasked with keeping a positive attitude and being patient with everyone around them. As we moved forward and as we started to look at our goals and what we wanted to achieve throughout the year, we added a third P to that equation, which was persistence. So we've adopted what we call the 3 Ps of addressing the COVID situation at SD1. As the rest of the world kind of hunkered down, we still have to operate. Our 3 treatment plants around the region have to operate. Obviously, everyone who uses water, that water, when it goes down the drain, we treat and we put back into the environment. So we are an essential part of the community, and we needed to be persistent as we looked through 2020 and into 21 regarding how we were going to handle our operations. So I'm happy to report that that's paid off very well for SD1 over the course of the year. And that's primarily because of the buy-in of our excellent staff, and specifically the technology and the IT department here, which allowed us to adapt very quickly in the early stages with remote meetings and things that are become very common to everyone now, as you experience this meeting yourself through this technology. But early on, I think we were a leader in getting remote meetings for our board through regulators. So I'm happy to report that we didn't have to delay one meeting. We didn't miss a deadline with any of our regulators. Everything that we wanted to achieve before the pandemic, we achieved through the pandemic. And as we hopefully are coming out of the end of the pandemic, I'm happy to report that, again, through the hard work and patience, persistence, and positivity of the staff, we've been able to achieve our goals. I'm going to highlight a couple things. And again, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but we did move our safety and all of our training to an online format. We implemented new processes for remote payroll processing, remote billing, remote payables, remote customer service. We converted our certified tapper program to an online program. Very proud of the fact that during the middle of this pandemic and everything that was going on, we were able to launch a new website. And if you haven't visited our website lately, it is much improved. It includes easier access to our information, mobile response design, ADA accessibility, streaming video, a new media library. We have a lot of informational items that we've created over the last couple years, and we have a media library where all of that can be accessed. Bill payment, frequently asked questions, and a lot more. Before I wrap up the COVID part, the other thing that we took very seriously was our customers and some of the support and relief measures that we felt were appropriate based on the circumstances that they were facing during the pandemic. And throughout this, and we're just now kind of loosening up some of these things, but we did suspend all shutoffs and penalties for our customers during the last year. We expanded our call center hours. So not only were we able to work remotely with our call center folks, but we expanded those hours so that folks who had issues would have more accessibility to customer service. We created public service announcements around our assistance programs, specifically our customer assistance program that's administered through Brighton Center. And then lastly, we did suspend our planned rate increase for the year 2020, which is actually fiscal year 21. And our consent decree drives most of our long-term financial planning. And we had planned to take a 5% increase in the fiscal year 2021. However, based on the circumstances surrounding COVID, we did not feel, and the board did not feel that was appropriate. So I was happy that we were able to give some relief to our customer base through those programs and not taking that increase. But that would not have been possible without the continuous improvement lean culture that we do operate under. We've had a lot of success with our capital program costs coming down. We've had a lot of success with our lean initiatives internally with our expenses. So in years past, we might not have had the luxury of being able to take a year off, so to speak, in our rate program. But again, as a testament to our staff and to this organization, we were able to for the benefit of our customers, not take that rate increase this year. Last year would be fiscal year 21. We're in the middle of our budget season this year. We've already had discussions about where we're headed going forward, and we should have some news on that front here in the next couple months, but I did want to point that out. And without taking a ton more time, because staff has a lot of the meat and potatoes of this presentation, but I do want to mention, the centerpiece of what we do pretty much on a daily basis outside of treating sanitary sewer, of course, is our Clean H2O 40 program. And our Clean H2O 40 program, if you are not familiar with that, is basically the branding that we have around our sewer overflow mitigation program. And, a couple years back, we switched gears on this program from a upsizing of gray infrastructure pipe, where we would upsize a 12-inch pipe to a 25-inch pipe in order to accommodate larger storms. Well, what's been happening is the storms have gotten larger. So when you had a 12-inch pipe and you upsize it to a 25-inch pipe to handle more water, well, the storm gets bigger, and now you need a 30-inch pipe as soon as you put the 25-inch pipe in the ground. So we took a step back, and we are now using a smart sewer approach where we're going to strategically hold stormwater in tanks and detention basins when it rains and release that flow back into our system at strategic times. And we equate this similarly to traffic lights during rush hour. You control your traffic lights to maintain a consistent flow in traffic, this is the same way we are going to maintain a consistent flow through our sanitary sewer pipes. Not only is it a smarter way to handle things, but it's also much less expensive. So on that front, I just want to mention a couple of the projects that we have either in process or getting ready to start. And on the tank front, we're building 3 tanks right now, one at Ash Street, Silver Grove. We're building one at Highland Heights. We have one just now getting under construction in Wilder. Many of you may be familiar with our Amsterdam Valley detention structure, which isn't a tank, but it's a very large detention structure at the Amsterdam Valley near DeVue Park at the Lewis Street in Covington area. Our largest sewer overflow is at the Licking River siphon, and happy to report that we're working on that. We're ahead of schedule on our Licking River siphon pipe. And the last one I want to mention is our Bromley pump station improvements. That Bromley pump station is one of our older assets, and that's being upgraded to handle larger flows as we speak. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to staff. I will be back at the end of the program for question and answer session. But before I turn it over to staff, I think we showed last year in this meeting, we showed a couple of our new videos with our stormwater program. And as a continuous improvement culture here, we're always looking for ways to educate our customers and our co-permittees and our partners in the community about why we do things and what we do here. So I think we have a new one for you that we're going to show, and it's entitled Why I Pay a Stormwater Fee. So Chris, I believe you have that teed up if you want to get that started. Thanks again to everybody for joining the call today, and hopefully you learned something valuable as we go through the process. So thanks again.
Did you ever wonder why you pay a stormwater fee to Sanitation District Number 1, or what services the fee pays for? Most Northern Kentuckians pay a stormwater fee because we all benefit from the stormwater services SD1 offers. As our region was developed, the natural landscape, things like grass and trees, were replaced by hard surfaces like streets, roofs, and driveways. These hard surfaces lead to increased stormwater runoff. And while natural landscapes can help rainwater absorb into the ground, these hard surfaces cannot. Instead, as rain falls on them, it runs off the streets, roofs, and driveways, increasing the volume and rate at which water flows off the property. If not properly managed, this increased water flow can create downstream problems, such as flooding, stream erosion, and pollution of local waterways. SD1's stormwater program seeks to manage the flow of water from hard surfaces in an effort to mitigate these issues within our community by regulating new development and improving existing infrastructure in our community to protect our region from stormwater runoff. SD1 owns and maintains about 425 miles of storm sewer pipe and nearly 32,000 storm structures in, around, and under most of Northern Kentucky's public roads and right-of-ways. This extensive network of stormwater assets directs water away from public roads and property to keep them safe and passable during rain events. As part of our stormwater management program, SD1 also ensures that the cities and counties of Northern Kentucky comply with important federal and state regulations designed to keep our local waterways clean and healthy. As stormwater runoff flows across our region, it can pick up anything in its path, carrying oil, garbage, and other pollutants into our local rivers and creeks. These pollutants affect the quality of the water we use for drinking water and recreation, in turn, threatening public health and harming aquatic life. While our entire region benefits from safe roads and clean waterways, SD1 has developed criteria to ensure that those likely to benefit the most from our stormwater programs are charged a stormwater fee. The stormwater boundary, based on both federal and local criteria, is approved by the state of Kentucky. The 3 criteria used to determine the boundary are property within an urbanized area, as determined by federal census data, property within close proximity to public sewer infrastructure, and property within a city or county that SD1 has partnered with to comply with federal stormwater regulations. Most stormwater customers fall within the first criteria because they live in an urbanized area of northern Kentucky. If you live within the stormwater boundary, even though you may not have a direct connection to SD1 sewer service, you benefit from our stormwater services by having safe, passable public roads and right-of-ways that help you get places like work, school, shopping, or church. And by protecting and improving local waterways that provide our drinking water and recreation. These are the important.
All right. With that, I think Brooke, we'll turn it over to you now for your MS4 update.
Sorry
Brooke,
about that, everyone.
there
Had a
you go.
couple of issues there. I'm going to share my screen now, a presentation. All right, let's get started with this. Again, good morning to everyone. Thank you again for joining us. My name is Brooke Sharman. I think I know most of you that are on the call today. And I am an environmental compliance manager here at SD1. I oversee the implementation of our MS4 permit that we have. As mentioned in that video that you just saw, the federal requirements that we have for managing stormwater quality within our service area that is implemented through a general permit that we have through the Kentucky Division of Water. So I'd like to provide some updates about that today, some things that we've been working on over this past year for that permit compliance, and then also take some questions from you all at the end. So to say the least, it has been an interesting year. As Adam mentioned before, even though we had a lot of things that we had to do a little differently with COVID-19 protocols, we still had to make sure we were complying with all of our rules, regulations, our federal and state requirements. One thing that we were able to accomplish this past year was updating our stormwater rules and regulations. And when we met as a group last year in March, I presented to you an overview of some of those updates that we were proposing. We did open that up for public feedback from you all. We got some great comments, really appreciated those comments from our co-permittee communities. And then we made a few additional updates. Our board approved those rules and regulations in June of 2020, and then those were approved by the Kentucky Division of Water of August 2020. So we are actively implementing those. I think a lot of good updates were made, and all of that information is available on our website if you're curious of, some of that detail. Another thing that we've been working on this past year were some service area updates. We were working in cooperation with the city of Florence. We had some issues along our shared boundary that split right through parcels. It made it difficult for kind of consistent stormwater implementation and management in those areas. So we worked with the city of Florence. We cleaned up that boundary. I think it's in much better shape now. So that was something that was a big project that we tackled. And then also a service area update. Covington is covered under their own general permit starting March 1. So with the service area boundary that you see now on our website, that will not include the city of Covington. So you'll see that change as well. Then one of the big things that we've done this past year was just making sure that we were adapting to meet all of those MS4 permit requirements under those COVID-19 protocols. Some things we were able to do just kind of business as usual, but for others, we really had to make some large adaptations. So with that, something that we had to make a big pivot on was our education outreach and public involvement. Because as you all know, we really couldn't have a lot of, face-to-face time with our public this year, especially with our school program. So with our elementary school program, when all of the schools, shut down, transitioned to virtual in early spring last year, many of them were already kind of gearing up for the stormwater curriculum that they teach in their programs. So we had to make sure that we transitioned all of that into an online version that was easily accessible by our teachers so they could use that in their virtual classrooms. That included a number of virtual lessons as well as pre-recorded presentations. And with our new website, it was great because all of this was available in a single web page. It was our online teacher toolkit where they could get all of this information that put it right there at their fingertips. In addition to that, we typically had gone into classrooms to do Enviroscape lessons, which is this really neat tool that allows you to show the impacts of stormwater runoff to the students. Again, we couldn't go into the classrooms, but our environmental educator was able to set up a lot of live virtual Enviroscape lessons with these different schools where she would join them in their Google Classroom, go through a video and explain this virtually. And we had a lot of good feedback on that. It was a great way for us to interact with the students again. And then another thing that we were very excited about was the development of a virtual field trip of our public service park. A big thanks to Campbell County Media. They came out to our site. They helped us record a few different features and lessons that went along with those features. So the students and the teachers and the chaperones that typically would come here to SD1 every year to do a field trip for some hands-on experience, even though they weren't able to be here in person, they had a virtual option. So I'm going to quickly play one of those videos for you so you can see what that was all about. So that was a video that we did, and I'm sorry if the sound may have not come through to you all. We'll get that updated so you can see that again. But these are all available on our website. There's a virtual public service park field trip for both school and our general residents. A lot of great information on there. So that was something that we tackled as well this year with our school program. In addition to that, since we weren't able to get out and do a lot of the, community engagement at different field days and those types of events, we really made use of our social media in partnering with our communications department with Chris and Olivia. They were a big help in getting a lot of this information out to the community. One thing we did were Water Wednesdays with Splash. It was a fun posting every Wednesday with a lot of fun family activities where they could learn a little bit more about stormwater and engage, through different activities and experiments. We also partnered with our Cooperative Extension Service, which is a wonderful service that we have in all 3 of our counties, to do a campaign about lawn care and how to do that in ways that is more water quality friendly and also better for your lawn. So that was a great partnership that we were able to do through our social media outreach. One thing that we were able to do as usual this year was the big household hazardous waste event. Again, a big cooperation with our solid waste coordinators that organized this event from all 3 counties. It was a major success. It was outdoors. We were all masked up, but we had over 2,500 vehicles come through that day, dropping off just tons of household hazardous waste. So that was a great event. it was nice that we didn't have to postpone that. Definitely a good opportunity for the community. So with a couple of other of our minimum control measures that we have to implement as part of the permit are with our construction oversight for active construction projects, permitting those to make sure they meet our stormwater requirements, also inspecting them to make sure that they're meeting their construction permit requirements. And that did not slow down this year. Development was booming. We issued a large number of permits, as you can see there, 11 clearing, 28 grading, and 79 of the land disturbance permits. And throughout the past year, we had 323 active construction sites that we still had to inspect. Again, that was pretty much business as usual. We were able to do that safely and fully comply with all of our permit requirements. And then with our other minimum control measure for post-construction management, that is making sure that we have best management practices that are implemented for these new development sites, making sure that that stormwater runoff that's coming from those sites is managed to help protect water quality. And in this past year, we had over 400 post-construction BMPs throughout our service area that we had to inspect. And again, we were able to maintain that compliance and fulfill all of those permit requirements for those two minimum control measures. In addition to that, we had our minimum control measure with illicit discharge. This is ensuring that it's only stormwater that's going down the storm drain so that we don't have illegal connections or that we don't have things like dumping into our storm system. Again, we were able to complete all of our permit required inspections. And in that, we actually were able to find 22 illicit discharges and have those eliminated. We did make a few adaptations, ensuring that our inspectors were safe, the public was safe, but all in all, we were able to fully meet our permit requirements on that and eliminate 22 of those illicit discharges. With our pollution prevention, that is our minimum control measure that we do in cooperation with all of our co-permittee communities. That kind of moved along as usual. As you all know, you're maintaining your municipal sites to make sure that they are not causing any stormwater pollution. We did have audits with the Kentucky Division of Water this year. They audited our MCMs 3 and 4, and they also audited the communities of Woodlawn and Ellesmere, and we did those as virtual audits. And we passed, which was great. Everything was in full compliance. The Division of Water was very happy with how everything was moving forward. And they have notified us that they will be selecting our co-permittee communities to do those audits with in the coming year. So I'll be reaching out to some of you folks, getting those set up. Again, we can prep and make sure we've got everything ready to go for those, but they're fairly painless. It's just making sure we provide the information and documentation we need to the Division of Water. We did have to suspend our annual co-permittee pollution prevention training this year, but we are working on some virtual options for that, and hopefully we'll be able to have that in person again this coming November. And then also I wanted to say thank you to all the co-permittee communities that did submit their site assessments. That's a permit requirement we have as well. We have that available both electronically and in paper form, and we did receive those from the co-permittee communities. So really appreciate your time in doing that. I know it's been a hectic year for you all as well. And then as far as future updates, there's a few things that we are currently working on. One is updating our stormwater best management practices manual. This is the manual that identifies the design and implementation and long-term operation and maintenance requirements for those post-construction BMPs. So those BMPs that are on those development sites that are controlling the water quality that's leaving those sites. We'll be making some updates to those. We'll keep you all in the loop on that. But what we're going to try to do is to streamline that manual, make it more accessible and user-friendly for our development community, for us, for the engineers that are constantly using that manual. They're also continuing to work on partnership opportunities, especially with our UK Cooperative Extension. Again, that's a great resource in all 3 of our counties. There's so much education that we all do where there's a lot of overlap, so whenever we can partner on those, that's great. This picture is an example of something that we've been doing with 4-H through the Cooperative Extension Service. They have in-classroom lessons that they do, and they've invited us to participate with them, of course, virtually right now, and to teach the urban stormwater cycle components of those lessons. So that's been a great opportunity for us to even, get into some additional schools and work with the great folks at the Cooperative Extension Service. You're also tackling some TMDL alternatives throughout our service area. So a TMDL stands for Total Maximum Daily Load. It is a report that is generated by the Kentucky Division of Water for what they refer to as impaired stream segments. And what we've been doing, and we've got one completed already for Gunpowder Creek, is because we've got some great active watershed partners throughout our area that are doing great work. We're also tackling a lot of problems throughout these areas. Instead of just having a generalized document that we get from Division of Water, we've been able to use some of these existing watershed plans in these areas, or work that we already have planned that we can formalize in a plan and get that to Division of Water, and they allow us to use that as an alternative to them developing an actual TMDL. And it's a good opportunity for us because it allows us to really use that information that we already have to take advantage of that implementation that's occurring either through our partners or that we're doing with SD1, and allows us to really tackle some of the sources of the problems in a more specific and localized way. So right now, like I said before, we have one that's developed for Gunpowder Creek in Boone County, which has been approved by Division of Water and EPA. We'll be working in the near future on another one for Wolper Creek, one for Banklet Creek in Kenton County, and one for 3 Mile Creek in Campbell County. So with that, I guess I'll open it up if anyone has any questions. I've also got my email address there. I think most of you have my contact information. If you don't want to ask a question today, just feel free to reach out to me and by email, or give me a call, and I'd be happy to follow up as well.
I do have a question.
Sure.
This is Gary Moore. So the work that SD1 does when it comes to our committee that works with the FELO payment in lieu programs with NKU's Environmental Center, but also with the conservancies, does that fall in this area, or does that fall in one of the other areas of SD1's work with stormwater?
So that is, it kind of touches a few different departments within SD1, both within our water resources department, but also with engineering as well. And I don't know, Jim, if you're on the call right now, if you wanted to provide any input or update on that, Jim Gibson, our water resources director.
Sure. Yeah. I guess to answer the question, that mainly we started it here in water resources as far as with all the data collection that we've done for the stream monitoring and all the water quality. But that's actually being transitioned to our engineering department. We actually have a prospectus, which is the plan to do the mitigation type activities. We are hoping to get that information. Our draft has been submitted to Division Water, to the Army Corps of Engineers. We're hoping to get that information back here in the next month or so to move forward, but we are still working on the mitigation issues that are surrounding our community and trying to provide more opportunities as well.
Yeah, I think that is a real win-win potential. Well, in many ways, of course, I think it can be very effective and efficient. It's definitely a way for SD1 to partner with the other agencies. But when I watch the video about why I pay a stormwater fee, I think there's so many components of this work that we would do in collaboration with the conservancies and the environmental components that get more community attention sometime. I think it'll be a great PR as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Judge Moore. And I think that's probably, we've been talking about, next steps and other activities we want to do videos and education on. I think once we get that bank approved or further in the process, I think that's going to be something we really want to start sharing with the community as you suggested. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay, well, Chris, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen and get started on the next. And again, I'll be around if anyone has any other questions, or feel free to reach out. Thanks again.
Thanks, Brooke. All right. Next up, myself and Rob Schroeder will be presenting on a little more detail on the Clean H2O40 program that Adam referenced earlier. And Adam kind of mentioned that it is started as a branding initiative around our sewer overflow mitigation program. But I'd like to step back a step from that and kind of give some context. And I'll start doing that by talking a little bit about our strategic business plan and our mission statement, and specifically, and that is to reliably provide the Northern Kentucky region with wastewater and stormwater services to protect public health, protect property, protect the environment, and support economic vitality. A couple of those in particular: protect the environment, protect public health, and protect property as well, all tie into Clean H2O40. And so at its core, Clean H2O40 is an SD1 mission program, really. As part of that business plan, we developed 7 goals. I'm not going to go through all of those goals, but a couple of them I'll mention because they're pertinent. One is optimal infrastructure management. Another is environmental stewardship. These guide all the work that we do in Clean H2O40 and beyond. But specifically, Clean H2O40 does connect to our consent decree. And as just a little bit of background, SD1, the state of Kentucky and the federal government entered into a consent decree in 2007 as a way of enforcing the Clean Water Act. In 2019, that consent decree was sort of updated, renegotiated, and the deadline changed from 2025, which is the day after tomorrow, the way things are going, and it was pushed to 2040. And so that's where the Clean H2O40 comes in. It's tied directly to the deadlines, the deadline of our amended consent decree program. And well, before I go to that, I'll as Adam mentioned earlier, the focus of our initial consent decree was on gray infrastructure, upsizing pipes, and that sort of thing. And the mindset of our initial consent decree was that, you know, SD1 sort of saw it as a hurdle, as something we had to overcome, something we had to deal with. We never really fully embraced what the amended consent decree, or what the original consent decree was about. And when I say we, I mean, you know, it's just sort of as a mindset. We didn't really celebrate what the Clean Water Act was really all about. And so with our amended consent decree, that's something we've really focused on. As you can tell, you know, even the term Clean H2O40 as opposed to amended consent decree is kind of one indication of the way we're approaching this. Okay, I'll try not to move around so much. I'm told I'm cutting out when I move. So, and then I did it. So I'll start off by just talking a little bit about what the amended consent decree says and what it requires. And the first one relates to sanitary sewer overflows. And as just kind of a background, as Northern Kentucky faces about 115 million gallons of SSOs in a typical year. And Rob Schroeder will talk a little bit about the typical year and what that means in just a few minutes. But for now, just to give you some context, when we talk about SSOs, we're talking about 115 million gallons a year, and the amended consent decree sets out some milestones. The first one is July 1st, 2023. We have to eliminate 20% of those typical year SSOs. And then you'll see the subsequent milestones. We have to eliminate 75% of them by January of 29, 90% of them by July of 2034, and then by January of 2040, we have to eliminate 100% of our typical year SSOs. I'll also point out that the pipe graphic that you see on your screen here, that's the O in our H2O40. As time goes by and we begin to chip away at those milestones, those will begin to disappear. The water in the pipe will begin to disappear. So, for instance, when we hit our 20% goal in 2023, that's roughly 20% of the water in the pipe gone. When we hit our 75% goal, and then when we hit our 90% goal, and then when we get our 100% goal. So that's sort of like the equivalent of one of those thermometers that show progress. The H2O40 graphic itself is a thermometer and will be used to show progress as we move forward in this program. On the CSO side, the combined system sewer overflows significantly more, 1.5 billion gallons in a typical year when we started working to mitigate overflows. That's how many the Northern Kentucky was facing, 1.5 billion with a B gallons of CSOs. And similarly, there are milestones connected to the CSO program, a little bit different. Instead of elimination, we're talking about recapture. By July of 23, we have to recapture 67% of typical year CSO volume. And by recapture, whatever comes out of the pipe has to go back in to our system. By 2029, 75%. By 34, it's 80%. And by the end of our Clean H2O40 program, we have to be at 85% recapture of CSOs. I mentioned earlier kind of reframing how we think about our work and how we talk about eliminating sewer overflows through Clean H2O40. Kind of a standard way or thinking about the old way that we talked about eliminating sewer overflows or mitigating sewer overflows is SD1 is bound by a federal court order called a consent decree to comply with certain prescribed legal limits related to the mitigation of SD1's separated sewer system and combined sewer system overflows. A couple of things to kind of point out in that phrase there is it was apologetic, shrugging our shoulders. This is something that we have no control over. We have to do it. It's federal mandates, and there's nothing we can do about it. We focused on federal court, the phrase federal court order, and even the phrase consent decree. Most people don't know what that means, and so by calling it a consent decree, you're introducing confusion right out of the gate. And then talking about legally prescribed benchmarks. The new way, kind of reframing that, is SD1 is partnering with the EPA and the Commonwealth of Kentucky to better manage our region's wastewater and stormwater by eliminating Northern Kentucky overflows, because it's the right thing to do for our community. That phrase kind of symbolizes the new approach that we're taking to overflow mitigation. And in this new thinking, we're talking about Clean H2O40. We're not talking about a consent decree. It's aspirational. It's not apologetic. We want to eliminate overflows. We want to completely eliminate typical year SSOs by 2040. It focuses on partnerships. We're partnering with the EPA. We're partnering with state regulators to protect public health, to protect property, to protect the environment, getting back to our mission. And we are, we're at the core of what we do. We're managing wastewater and stormwater. And by effectively doing that, we will eliminate and mitigate these overflows. And finally, it's the right thing to do for our community. That's a critical piece that was missing, I think, before this new approach. So as Adam said, Clean Clean H2O40 is a branding initiative around our mitigation, but really it encompasses three aspects of SD1. It's our strategic business plan and the focus on protecting public health, protecting property, protecting the environment. It's our amended consent decree for sure, and the mitigation of sewer overflows. And it's also our kind of embodies our updated watershed plan. And you know what I like about Clean H2O40 and the campaign isn't that it's just a branding campaign. It's really a simplification. You know, if we were to try to educate the public about our strategic business plan, our amended consent decree, our updated watershed plan, it gets confusing. What is what, and how do they tie to each other and relate to each other? So I like to think of Clean H2O40 as a blueprint. We've got the strategic business plan that is our 50,000 foot view of what we do and what our mission is. We've got the amended consent decree, which is our commitment to overflow mitigation. And we've got our updated watershed plan, which is our game plan for how we're going to accomplish those amended consent decree goals. And Clean H2O40 kind of bundles all of those together and does it in a way that I think is a little bit easier to understand than trying to understand them individually. The updated watershed plan, Adam talked a little bit about it earlier. Our updated watershed plan brings a new approach to overflow mitigation. As he said, whereas before we focused on gray infrastructure, upsizing pipes, and I think Adam said, you know, we can't really afford to just continue to build bigger and bigger pipes and wait for bigger and bigger storms to come around and overwhelm those pipes. That strategy doesn't really work. So under the new watershed plan, we started off by running thousands of used artificial intelligence to run thousands of scenarios across our region of what happens when various factors change. When we get a certain level storm, where are the pinch points? Where are the areas that see issues? And by doing that and focusing on that first, we were able to develop the beginnings of a blueprint that makes sense, that are effective, that are efficient, that maximize ratepayer dollars and in a way that's gets the biggest bang for the buck, essentially. And the strategy shifted from building bigger and bigger pipes to, as Adam mentioned, one of using smart sewer technology and using storage to accomplish those goals. We're going to build EQ tanks. We've already got 3 of them in production right now, and those EQ tanks are going to store up the water when heavy rains fall, and then we'll be able to control how quickly that water gets reintroduced into our system in a way that doesn't overwhelm the system. And this is how you eliminate the overflows. And that's where your smart sewer technology comes into those coordinated controls. It's the first step. Building the EQ tanks is the first step to a system-wide coordination, storing flow in tanks, storing flow in pipes, storing flow in other structures, detention basins, what have you, across our region. Adam used the analogy of the smart traffic lights, and I love that analogy because everybody, understands that. It's putting that same philosophy to work in our system so that traffic doesn't get too overwhelming at any point, but stays pretty steady. When it's raining heavily, we're storing water. When it starts to dry and the rain stops, we start to reintroduce water into our system in a way that doesn't overwhelm it. And the best of all is that strategy is significantly more affordable than just trying to build bigger and bigger pipes and chase your own tail. We estimate that this new approach is going to save literally hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 20 years. And just to give you an example of the EQ tanks, if you haven't seen them, you haven't gotten a chance to see what that's about. Here's a picture that was just taken earlier this week of the Highland Heights EQ tank. I love that photo. You don't get to see a perspective like that very often. We had a drone in the area and got this photo of the Highland Heights EQ tank. And then Here is the Silver Grove. It's not quite as far along, obviously, but this was taken earlier this week as well, I believe. And these tanks, these two tanks, when combined, they're about a mile apart on Route 8, and they'll combine to hold 3 million gallons when they're full. So they won't be full all the time. They'll only fill up when we have heavy wet weather events. But you know, that 3 million gallons at the right time can be so significant. In fact, these two tanks we anticipate will eliminate about 21 million gallons of typical year SSOs, which is pretty much our first consent decree milestone goal. You know, these tanks alone will get us about to that first goal of 20% elimination of typical year SSOs. And so I believe with that, I'll hand it over to Rob. He's the real brains behind the operation of Clean H2O40. I'm the communications guy and can talk way up here about it, but Rob's the one who's actually in the model every day, trying to squeeze every bit of efficiency out of this program and out of this system. And so, Rob, I'll turn it over to you so that you can continue this discussion about Clean H2O40. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and you can share yours, and look at that.
All right. Can you see that, Chris?
Yep, looks great.
Good. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate the opportunity to talk here with everybody about some of this. Like Chris said, I'm the engineer in the crew, so I will be I'll getting more into the nuts and bolts about how we're trying to do some of these things. I'll go into a little bit more detail, like Chris said, about what is a typical year. What does that mean? What does 115 million gallons of overflow and 1.5 billion gallons of overflow mean? So I'm going to try to put a little bit of meat on the bone and talk a little bit more about that. There's some basic comments I want to bring up. The first one is, until it rains, we have no overflows. So I think it's been brought up a couple of times today, is that the managing the stormwater is a big component of managing sanitary overflows also. And the trying to get all the overflows to stop, it's a bit of a delicate balancing act. Chris and Adam both talked about, if you build EQ tanks, you can hold it back. You can't build conveyance. If you build conveyance everywhere and you got everything just flowing through pipes, maybe the pipes have a certain cost, but then you're looking at major treatment plant upgrades because you need to handle all that capacity now. So the strategic part of this was to look at existing assets and try to understand how we can maximize their use, as well as supplement those existing assets with new structures or new facilities to help us get to our H2O40 goals. I want to talk about there's many methods of controlling overflows. There's something called source control, and we've done a few projects like this to kind of see how they would go. It's something called eye removal, and that's an area where there's sometimes downspouts are tied into a separate sanitary system. What that does, it just overwhelms the pipe with flow going directly into the sanitary pipe, and it takes up space. So one goal is to try to go ahead and eliminate those times or those connections of strictly stormwater that could otherwise move to a creek, not cause any problems, but instead it's going into the sanitary system. So II control, it stands for inflow and infiltration. Sometimes we line pipes to make sure that the groundwater doesn't leak into a pipe and grab capacity. Been a lot of talk about storage today. These EQ tanks are a big component of our program, and they have proven to be very beneficial, and you'll be seeing those go up in strategic locations around the 3-county area. Another storage option is a large diameter, relatively flat pipe. You can actually do storage within that pipe. At the end of that pipe, if you put a control valve, you can go ahead and maybe in a smaller storm that wouldn't ordinarily fill up that entire 10-foot diameter pipe. I mean, we're talking big pipes. You can put a control valve at the end of it that in smaller storms where the pipe doesn't fill up, you close off that control valve at the end of the pipe and force the water to back up. And then that, of course, can take a load off of other downstream pipes, and it can lessen the overflow potential downstream of that. So storage can come in many forms. Like I say, it can be a tank, it can be a large pipe, other ways. And then conveyance is a part of the program. There are some instances where strategically it is more cost effective to go ahead and build some conveyance piping, maybe to get it to a certain pump station, those sorts of things. So conveyance, it does have a place, but I think the focus of our program is on the storage. Not all strategies work in all areas. Topography does not work well for us here in northern Kentucky. I talked about long, flat pipes, large diameter pipes. We don't have many of those. Obviously, our hilly terrain does not allow itself to have, long stretches of flat, large diameter pipes. So the terrain around here gives us a little bit of a hurdle to overcome. Some overflows may be a significant distance, I should say, away from the treatment facility. So convey that flow to the treatment facility, as Chris had mentioned, it's a lot of pipe, it's a long run, it's just too expensive. So strategically in those areas, we are going for the EQ tanks, the storage tanks, and then let that flow loose when the storm does pass. And part of the balancing act also is just the capacity of the treatment plant, because if you get too much flow to the treatment plant, then you are going to wind up spending a lot of money making the treatment plants larger, and that obviously costs money. So we're trying to use existing infrastructure to its maximum benefit and supplementing it where we can. So here's the part for you engineers. It's kind of how our overflows measured. Does it mean we control overflows to a 100-year storm, or does it mean we control overflows when it sprinkles? There's a way to measure how we are controlling overflows. So it's very difficult or next to impossible, I'll say, to understand exactly how much rain falls and exactly what parts of our service area, and then understand when that rain falls, how much flow does actually escape the system and get on the ground or get in the waterways. So the measurement of how healthy a system is, or how well we can control overflows, it's based on an assumed amount of rain that a computer will place on our existing infrastructure. So the computer will say, it rained, here's our existing infrastructure, and through a lot of iterations, it will tell you how much flow did escape or how much did not escape. And so the infrastructure is a defined thing, a defined item, I suppose. And that's just, we have our GIS records and such, and that goes into the computer. Then the rainfall component of it, about 15 years ago when SD1 first started developing plans to control overflows, it was decided between the regulators and SD1 to use the rainfall that occurred in 1970 at the airport as a standard for controlling overflows. So the computer will put the rain that occurred at the airport, it will assume that the rain, that amount of rain that fell at the airport rains everywhere in the system, a constant rain everywhere in the system, based on the 1970 flow that was received at the airport. That was a very defined rain event, or I should say a rain year. And in that rain year, there was about 70 rain events. Some were small, maybe didn't cause very few overflows, or some none at all. And some were very large rain events that really added to the amount of overflows that we have in our system. So that's called our typical year. 1970 is called our typical year, and that's the term that Chris had referred to earlier. So the computer will go ahead, put the rainfall on the system. It'll have an output that says, here's how much rain, or here's how many overflows you have. The largest storm in 1970, just as a point of reference, the largest storm in 1970 was about 2.3 inches of rain over an approximately 6-hour period. So, and that is a pretty good sized storm. It really is. I don't think we've had any of those storms this year yet. So that's the largest storm in our typical year. Also, part of the delicate balancing act is also in 1970, the Ohio River rose at various times to various elevations. and that had a negative impact on our sewer system. I'm not sure people realize that, but at certain river elevations, the river actually back up into our sewer system, and it'll steal necessary capacity to handle regular sewage flows. There are floodgates in the sewer system that are shut that protect the cities, but these gates also, while protecting the cities, they also impact how the flow can move around our collection system. So the river is a component of our watershed plan. It's just part of the balancing act. We've talked about SSOs and CSOs. So I think most people are aware we have a part of our system has separate sanitary overflows or separate sanitary flows, and those are just areas where there's typically in the newer parts of town where there's two sewer systems. There's one for storm and there's one for sanitary. So that's called the separate sanitary system. And then we are regulated to eliminate 100% of the overflows that occur in that storm of about 2.2 inches there, but it's 2.3 inches in a 6-hour storm. So that is the level of detail that we have to control overflows in the separate system. Now in the combined system, it gets a little complicated, but that's in the combined system, which is typically a lot of the river cities and then along the Licking River, run south along the Licking River some. 85% of the flow that gets into those pipes must be treated before it's discharged to a public waterway. So Chris used the term, there's 1.5 billion gallons of overflows in the combined system is what that is. Excuse me. But actually during a typical year, we get approximately 4.5 billion gallons of flow that gets into our combined system. And that is all figured out by the computer system. It imposes that rain of typical year 1970 on our system. And it can tell you that with that rainfall, with our given infrastructure, we will get about 4.5 billion gallons of flow. And then what we need to do as a part of H2O40 is we need to capture or treat or otherwise handle 85% of that flow. And as Chris said, right now, I think we're at about 67% of that flow. So we've got to raise that by close to 20% more flow that we do need to get. So the one thing to understand also is, the 2 inches in a 6-hour period, that's the computer generated storm that we put on our separate system. But that's not to say that there are maybe a storm that's a half hour or an hour long, but incredibly intense, or maybe you get 2 hours in one. If you get 2 inches of rain in 1 hour, that real flash rain can still cause overflows. So it's the balancing act between storm sizes and durations and that sort of thing that go into the equation about eliminating overflows. I'll talk a little bit about the original versus the updated watershed plan. Chris and Adam both touched on that a little bit. I'm going to go into a little bit of the details about when we use certain strategies on certain occasions. The previous plan was based largely on a source control, the II removal, that sort of thing. The plan tried to remove downspouts and driveway drains that were connected. The plan also involved lining pipes and such. And this type of system can work, but we did some pilot projects and it proved to be very labor intensive and very expensive for the SD1 system. So not all strategies work for all towns or all service areas. This plan involved a significant amount of work on private property, which it proved to be a little bit problematic, and the amount of effort to make that happen proved to be problematic a little bit. So we're using all the different types of all the different tools in the toolbox to go ahead and try to solve the overflow problem. And we talked about the EQ tanks, and sometimes conveyance is the method of choice. As an example, I'll speak a little more in detail about the Silver Grove and Highland Heights area. It's on Route 8. It's the very far eastern part of our system. We've got the 2 EQ tanks under construction, and to run a pipe all the way from that location, all the way over to our Dry Creek plant, or even up the hill into the Eastern Regional plant, it was just much more cost effective to go ahead and store it and let it go. By the same token, there's a project on Bromley Crescent Springs Road that will convey flow to the Bromley pump station, which is immediately downhill of this project area. The Bromley pump station will then pump the Dry Creek treatment plant. But in this case, the overflows are in relative close proximity to a facility that can handle that flow. So the choice in that location is to go ahead and build some conveyance piping, because it's more cost effective to go ahead and build that conveyance piping. It's a passive system. There's no moving parts. It can just sit underground and convey water to the Bromley pumping station. Our watershed plan, as I've talked about in the past, it also utilizes these electrically controlled valves. We got 10 basins that run roughly along I-75 that are used to hold stormwater. These basins ultimately drain into our combined system, so they do get into the sanitary combined system. So what we're doing is we are developing valves, or we're installing valves, electrically controlled valves. Now these valves have a downstream sensor, which actually measures the flow level in one of our large 10. I think the one down here is a 12-foot diameter pipe. Actually, there's a 12-foot diameter pipe down there. And if that pipe is only half full during a certain rain event, there's a level sensor downstream close to the river that will say, I've still got capacity here. You can let a little more flow come down. But in some cases, if the pipe is full and it's going to start overflowing at some place, the valve, or the sensor, I should say, will tell the valve upstream is I'm full, hold water back. And and our IT staff is currently incorporating that into our SCADA system to just provide more control. So the point is, there's different strategies for different locations, and it's all part of the balancing act. This exhibit here, it just looks like a bunch of colors on a drawing, but what it is it represents the colored lines are pipe improvements. The green dots, some of the green dots without the dot in the green circles, I should say, without the dot in the middle, and some of the green circles do not have the dot in the middle. Anyway, each one of these designations represent a different project or a different improvement that needs to be made throughout our system to go ahead and get to the H2O4 goals. The concentration of green dots along the Licking and the Ohio River, those aren't all major projects. One of the components to help us understand or help us to control how much river water gets into our system and creates capacity problems is we're putting backflow preventers on these outfalls, as we call them. These backflow preventers will stop the river from getting back into our system and stealing capacity. And we're going to be protecting our system up to a river level of approximately 47 feet. Now, in the typical year, 1970, the Ohio River actually did get up to over that level. It got close to 50 feet at one point. So in our typical year, our computer runs, there is still some inflow from the Ohio River that does get back into our system. And the 47-foot designation is as high as we could take it without compromising other facilities, flood stations, and that sort of thing. So 47 feet is how high our system will be protected. On some of the areas there's, and I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but there's some areas here. These are areas that are going to be incorporated into a detention basin. We're going to try to grab this area here and send it to a detention basin down in these areas. Over in this area, it's a little bit lighter, almost a beige coloring. These are areas here and here where we actually are going to implement a little bit of II removal. It was determined that in this particular case, it was more cost effective to go ahead and look at the II in these areas as opposed to just conveying it or storing it. There are areas where there's a very high level of I&I, and we can go in there and we can probably get a lot of bang for the buck and just find a couple of big sources, and it will have a very positive impact on the downstream flows. So once again, there's an II component, there's detention basis components, there's these lines representing pipe improvements. Down here to the south, this is a new pump station, and what this pump station will do, it will take a lot of the flow from the southern part of Kenton County, and it's going to redirect it to the west over towards our Western Regional treatment facility. That'll free up capacity in the Dry Creek area, the Dry Creek treatment plant. And we'll go ahead and use some capacity that's available in the Western treatment facility. Okay, then over here to the west, these are large EQ facilities to go ahead and handle some current overflows that are happening down in those areas. So we need to do that. The other thing I'll mention, and I think it was clear from Chris, but I'll say it again just to make sure, is all the improvements we're building, they're all designed to handle very comfortably the anticipated flows for 2040. So it's not just we're building it for today, we are building it for anticipated flows. We met with the 3 counties and very detailed meetings about where they anticipate development. And we built those future flows into this so that when we get to 2040, we will have handled all of the flows that are currently going off, plus any additional flows that come onto the system over the next 20 years or so. And this is my final slide. I've been talking a while here. We're also taking, what Chris had said is really true, is that we're really embracing this watershed plan, this consent decree, H2040, whatever you want to call it. We're really embracing it as not a problem, but more an opportunity. And to that end, what we're doing is we're going ahead and taking what we're calling a holistic approach. We're responsible for the storm and the sanitary in the 3-county area. So while we're in there doing these watershed plan projects, H2040 projects, we're also considering all the other elements in a certain area. There's storm pipes in the areas that are close to these sanitary improvements are made. There's stream bank erosion problems that occur in some of these areas. Also, stream bank erosion, it obviously threatens some of your roads, but it threatens some of our sanitary assets also. So we're going into an area and we're looking at all these things at one spot. And as an example of that, this here, it's one of the areas that we think we're going to go ahead and look at first. I'll do a little explaining about this. These blue ellipses here, these are areas where there's stream bank erosion and such. The flow coming down the creek has been to the point where it's starting to erode the banks a little bit, and we have sanitary assets that are threatened in these areas. So we're considering that. The black circles in this particular slide, these are areas where we have known high water or flooding problems that happen. And then a lot of the colored lines are similar to the other slide I just showed you. These are pipe improvements, all down through here and here, pipe improvements here, pipe improvements. So as you look at this area, you can say, well, you've got storm problems, you got sanitary problems, you got stream bank erosions. So we are going to launch a study to look at all these elements that ultimately feed down to this area to the right. It's near Bullock Pen, Doe Run Lake area. So we're taking this holistic approach. We think it is a strategy that we can build upon the updated watershed plan with, and we think it will be a very efficient way to go ahead and solve some of the known watershed plan problems, the overflow problems, but it's also a way to very strategically, hopefully, go ahead and solve some other problems while we're at it. And it's an approach that we will use up in this area and eventually hope to roll it out to many other areas. But once again, to strategically look at how do we solve some of the issues of the SD1 service area. And Chris, I think that brings me to the end of what I'd like to say.
Excellent. Then I'll go ahead and open it up to any questions. If you have questions for Rob, questions for me, questions for anyone else who presented today, general questions, now's a great time to get those answered.
This is Gary Moore. This is a more general question. Pause for a minute to see if anyone had anything for that specific presentation. But as president of NACO, I'm getting some opportunities to interact with the new Biden administration. And I have a one-on-one call with the new EPA administrator, Michael Regan, tomorrow morning at 11:30. And NACO will give me their talking points on behalf of all of the nation's counties, but they normally give me a paragraph in the middle of that to insert any local points I would want to make. So in your all's interactions with the Corps, with federal EPA, state EPA, is there something that we would want to make the new administrator aware of? And you don't have to answer that right now. You could even email this to me, sometime even early tomorrow morning. But if your team would want to think about that, but what are the biggest stumbling blocks in dealing with US EPA at this point?
Hey Gary, thanks for the question. As you know, we've been heavily involved in some of the process that we've had recently with negotiating with the federal EPA, and right now, I think as far as the presentation and what we presented today, and I want to thank Chris and Rob and Brooke. I think they did an excellent job explaining, where we are with our programs. But we have a pretty good working relationship at this point in time with the federal EPA regarding our sanitary sewer overflows. I think the biggest threat that we're looking at coming down the pike is more permit-related regulations on our plants. Total daily maximum loads. Brooke touched on it earlier as far as kind of streams, but as far as permitting in our plants, some of the things that we're hearing as far as tightening the regulations on discharges, which will actually not necessarily affect us as much as it's going to affect our customer base and our industrial customer discharges, because they're going to be regulating, what we're hearing is a lot more stringently on the amount of industrial discharge, the nitrogen content, the phosphorus content, some of the other things that they're looking at as far as tightening up regulations that would affect us at the plant level that we would have to adjust for, but what would most likely affect would be point source remediation from our industrial customers. So as far as the biggest threat that we're seeing coming down the pike, that would be it. We're always at risk of tightening regulations on, any type of discharge or overflows. But I think we're in a really, really good spot since the ink just dried on our consent decree. I don't think we're going to have to go back and have any real renegotiations on that for any time soon. So I'll go back to my original point. I think the biggest threat that we have is really the more point source tightening of regulation of those industrial discharges. So, and I don't expect you to, maybe you're taking notes or not, but I'll follow this up with an email so you have some talking points. And I'll think about it a little bit more to see if there's something else specific that we would like to ask. The other thing would be the stimulus funds, which you and I have talked about. Any help we can get as far as stimulus money is concerned for wastewater improvements is less money that I and our team and SD1 is going to have to collect from our ratepayers. So, just putting more of an emphasis on help if you're going to put a $2 billion stimulus fund in place for infrastructure, that wastewater, water infrastructure would be a significant part of that. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but I think that's the key points that we would like to get across at this point, and I'll follow up with an email on those.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Positive comment,
Yes.
Gary, again. The green H2O 40, I love the approach. I love the marketing. Not marketing, but I love the messaging and how it applies to all partners. So well done, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Barry Burke. After being involved in some of the earlier comprehensive plan updates with the Area Planning Commission, I applaud you for continuing the effort, to upgrade, the quality of what's going on. I guess in earlier years, we had obviously the CSO problems, we had the SSO problems, and trying to address those over time. It seems like, the new plan that you're working on right now is really a positive forward looking effort of trying to make sure that we do the right thing in the future. I guess my three questions, and then I'll shut up a while, is that number one is that can you identify, maybe it's a Jim, somebody, incentive cost share programs that a lot of the cities, an integral part or spoke of the wheel, have in terms of trying to cost share and some of the individual problems that the urban areas in the cities have, primarily, I guess, with the SSO's problem. Number two, give me kind of a general feeling as to the status of maybe any effort in terms of updating the current maps. And then, without being cynical, is there any effort in terms of upgrading this whole 50-year-old 1970 typical year storm? I'm finished.
Gotcha. So I'm gonna, Jim, if you're on, or Brooke, if you wanna cover the incentive cost share programs, we last year I think we shared both of our videos, so they'll give you a brief kind of summary of those programs, but the in-depth kind of educational piece is on our website. We have 2 explainer videos, just like our why we pay a stormwater fee video on those. But Jim or Brooke, if you just want to cover the basics on our incentives for our co-permittees.
Sure. So we have our public cost share program that we've had, and as you know, Barry, I think in 2003 when we first started the program. It is a 50-50 cost share just per a point in time that the board funds at about $1 million a year. We also have kind of expanded some of those programs into a technical assistance program for the cities and the counties. So if there's some stormwater issues that may not necessarily be related to a public infrastructure right away, that we can give some technical assistance. We have some budgets for that. And then also new development here the last couple of years was a private cost share program, to where the cities could come to SD1 and help some of their citizens, whether it was a residential or a non-residential type of situation. So those programs have been in place for a number of years and have been tweaked through time. So we do still see a lot of value with those programs going forward. So as Adam said, there are some really good videos on our website that kind of give you some more specifics. So
Good.
I guess, Barry, I didn't understand the question about the maps. Can you elaborate on that one?
Well, every so often you updated those maps. They're online. I think I'm just trying to identify, when I look at those maps, is it a current update? How old are they? Is that a program that you continue to update on a regular basis?
And when you refer to the map, you're talking about the infrastructure, the sanitary and storm maps?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
yes. So our GIS, we constantly get updates from our folks in the field, from new development. We get record drawings in. So that actually, we have an update process as that occurs. Our GIS team updates those layers and then does give those layers to PDS, to Boone County GIS, and Campbell County Plains. So there are constant updates to our sewer system layers.
Thank you.
And I'll field the last one. And it was the question about the effort to change or to think about the 1970 standard year storm. And I want to reiterate that, or mention anyway, that our consent decree metrics are the absolute minimum that we have to accomplish, right? As you heard the description by Chris, and as you listen to Rob talk about our program, we're trying to make this program as dynamic as possible. So while our minimum standard is that 1970 storm, Rob mentioned we're already incorporating growth into these numbers. The other thing that we do every time we plan a project is, for instance, when you look at the Highland Heights Silver Grove tanks, we could capture, and I'll try to be as simple as possible, a 1970 storm with a 32-foot diameter tank, right? But it's cheaper now to make that a 35-foot diameter tank to capture a larger storm event, right? So we're doing the cost benefit analysis on the front end to make sure that we're not being short-sighted, that we are actually not just meeting the minimum requirements of the model, but when it rains, that we're actually holding the water back. The other thing that we're incorporating into our program is what I like to call plug and play type of things, where you leave room for expansion of EQ, which under a smart system just allows you to store more water, so that as the storms continue to grow, that you can adapt. Instead of tearing out all the pipe that we put in the ground for that 25-inch or 25-year storm, we can plug in an additional EQ tank or basin so that it's expandable as we go. So we're not just doing another consent decree type program in perpetuity. So we've thought about it, Mary. I appreciate the question. We're trying to do the best we can, and Rob used the correct words. We're trying to balance this the best we can, but we are considering not only for today, but we're looking into the future and how we can do the best for not only the environment, but our ratepayers' pocketbooks, along with everything else that we have to do as an organization. So I hope that answers the question.
I thank you for all those answers.
Any other questions? Well, not hearing any other questions, I'll go ahead and close this out today. I want to thank everyone for coming. I want to let you remind you, as Angela said earlier, we have been recording, and we will we'll post this video to our website, our social media channels sometime today. It takes a little while to process that stuff, but we'll get it up and get it out there today. But I do want to thank everybody for being here, for taking the time out of your very busy schedules. To hear some updates on what we've got going here at SD1. Obviously, there's a lot happening here. We're very excited about Clean H2040 and about the other programs that we've got going. And so we were certainly excited to share that progress and to share that update with everyone today. But thank you so much for being here. And we look forward to seeing you soon in person.
Thanks, everybody.